Welcome into our next installment of our virtual internship series. My name is Danny Rubin, the founder of our company. We're called Rubin. Really thrilled to have you today for an exciting conversation on video game development. And it's the world of video gaming in general. We have a great guest who joined us last school year. We brought him back, Paul Silverman from Bethesda. And we'll get into Paul's background and the work he does in just a few minutes. We also have my teammate Mac Dowd here. Many of you have seen her before, our implementation specialist at Rubin. Mac, you can click off your camera. She'll hang out in the chat. And we also have Amber Caldwell, our sign language interpreter for the session. So thank you, Amber, for being here. And again, welcome to our conversation on video game development. Our company, Rubin, we provide online instruction for business communication skills. Teachers, can you please show me your Zoom hands if your students ever send you emails that look like text messages? Any emails like text messages? I see some hands flying up. Okay, so we help students communicate professionally for opportunities, emails and phone calls, conversations, learning how to tighten up our game so we look impressive to the person on the other side. And we're going to learn some of those techniques and skills throughout our conversation today. Even though it's about video games, as our guest will tell you too, it's also about being a good communicator to be successful in your job. Not just the science, the math, the tech, but also the interpersonal skills as well. And so before we jump into that conversation, as we always do, we want to offer you some resources for your classroom. So, Mac, do you mind turning on the share for the panelists? I gave her the hosting privileges, and now I need to share my screen. Mac, are you able to let me turn on my screen share? Well, as she does that, I want to remind everybody to please keep your comments focused on our topic today in the chat so we can stay focused on our conversation and make sure that everybody can enjoy the discussion and no distractions. Not sure where Mac went. So we will, in the meantime, we'll get started with our guest and she'll come back to us in just a second. So Paul, why don't you go ahead and give us your background on how you got to the job you're in and what you're doing today at Bethesda.
Awesome. Yeah, for sure. And thanks for having me on, and thanks to everybody who tuned in. It's great to be here with you today. So I'm Paul Silverman. I'm the research director here at Bethesda. And I'll give a little background on what that means and then how I got to this role and where I fit within the organization. So as the research director, I work with different people throughout the company, the game development teams, the marketing teams, the internal strategy teams, and I go out and I research and I try and understand what's going on in the gaming industry, what different gamers like, what different gamers don't like, and then I work with the various game teams to try and help them figure out ways to make their games more interesting to people, to make sure that their games keep up with certain trends and certain preferences going on within the industry and within the whole world of video game players. And I also then work with the marketing teams to make sure that when we're marketing our games, we're marketing them to the people that we think will most enjoy them, and that we're showing off the stuff that we think is going to be the most exciting or appealing to the players. And so I get a unique view of game development from the beginning when we're kind of concepting what a potential game could look like, and it's just words on paper and some pictures, all the way through to when we have a game that we're testing to see if people like it before we release it. And then some games after we release them, as many of you know, we have additional content that gets added to the games after launch. And so I get to work with the various teams that work to have all of that come together. So in terms of how I got here, I actually went to school, I studied economics. And I was really just fascinated in how people made different decisions and how people consider trade-offs between different decisions. So why would a person buy one thing over another thing, and what those implications are for the wider marketplace, so to speak. And I ended up going to graduate school to study that. Well, in graduate school, I studied behavioral economics and game theory. And then I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew I wanted to do something where I was interchanging business and psychology in some way and understanding how people made decisions and then trying to help other people make better decisions based on that understanding. And I got a job working at a consultancy, a research consultancy. It was actually Danny that helped me get that job, my first job out of graduate school. So big up to Danny. And I didn't work directly with him, but he helped me get my spot on a video game research team. And from there, I was able to learn more about the industry, learn more about how video games are made and how they're marketed and how different companies consider which video games work for different types of folks. And then I started learning more and more about the ins and outs and the sausage making of gaming in general. So that's a quick spiel.
That's great.
Yep.
Thank you for that. And we're going to get more into your background and then the work that goes on every day at Bethesda in just a minute. I do want to just pause for 1 second and make sure I offer some resources to teachers and just hit a few housekeeping notes before we truly dive in. So I'm going to do that real quickly. I'm going to share my screen. Let me pull up my slide. Okay. Those of you who do not have these resources yet, we've given them out in past sessions, but for those who are new to our community, we would love for you to have a Google Drive folder for free of lessons for email etiquette. You can see the topics we cover: email addresses, not sending emails like text messages, writing subject lines, addressing teachers appropriately, making email signatures, lots of stuff that I'd love for you to use in the class and share with teachers. So I will offer that up in just a second, this Google Drive folder, as well an online presentation checklist, which we like to pass out too, with some quick tips on how to prepare for presentations and what to do during the presentation. Free resources. If you're new to our community, teachers here, and you'd like these resources, go to the chat right now. Thank you, Sarah. She did our cursive writing exercise. That's a different set of resources. Please go to the chat right now, type interested and your email address. Interested and your email address. And if you're new to our community, we will reach out to you for a brief conversation in the next couple of days to say hello, learn about your program, and help you make sense of these resources within your class or your school, your department. Help teach students email etiquette. That's what we're all about. So please put your information. Thank you to those who are doing that. And we will reach out to you with a brief calendar invite for 5 minutes to learn about your program and pass it along. Okay. Continue to do that. I'm going to get to the next couple slides. We can get back to talking to Paul. Also, you're here today for our session on video games, and we do our virtual internship series every 2 weeks. And next, in 2 weeks' time, on the 16th of November, we're going to do the world of being a veterinarian.
Oh, cool.
With a special guest, a doctor here in Virginia. And so anybody interested in that topic, show of hands about learning about being a vet? Maybe Paul will come back.
Yeah, that sounds like fun.
So that'll be a great conversation, totally switching gears about learning about what that world is like every single day. So join us in 2 weeks for that. Also, if you're watching this session on a recording, you can still have those email lessons. Just send an email to the email address on screen with the subject line Rubin email worksheets, and we'll get it to you. And everyone here today who's joining us live, we will email you a certificate on Thursday morning, tomorrow morning, with your certificate to show that you were here. Okay, so look out for that in your email in the morning. Okay, and thanks to those who said they want to learn how to be a vet. That'll be a really neat conversation. So I'll mention these things again at the end, but I wanted to make sure we got them in. And so let me turn off that share. And I want to actually share another screen and we'll get Paul back in the conversation. So where did that go? Second. There it is. Oh, same screen I was on. Okay. There it is. All right. So actually one last thing to say, and then we'll bring Paul in. So for those who are new to us, again, we're the Rubin Company. We provide online curriculum for business communication. Our curriculum is called Emerge. And many of the themes we discuss in our sessions come out of our online exercises. We cover email etiquette lessons and life skills, phone and video etiquette lessons. We do all kinds of employability communication, networking, and cover letters, and LinkedIn, job interview prep. We do entrepreneurship communication, sales writing, website writing, PR, fundraising communication. And we do leadership communication, managers, clients, projects, public speaking, report writing, all kinds of things. The teachers here, are you an advisor to a student organization? Put your CTSO or your student organization in the chat. Which one do you oversee? Because hopefully some of the lessons we're talking about today can also inform your student organization members, as well as what you do in the classroom. TSA, Skills USA, DECA, FBLA, robotics, esports, I like that, NTHS, all kinds of great things, okay? So the first thing that I wanted to bring Paul in and talk about is the importance of, when you meet somebody new, the value of doing some homework before the conversation, and how powerful that can be when you're interviewing for an opportunity. So what I did before the interview is I went to the Bethesda website, and the secret page, students, listen to me closely, the secret page that's always hiding in plain sight that I went to is right down here, and it's called News. This is the good stuff, because this is where companies are sharing what's going on right now, the latest and greatest. And I landed on a page where the company is celebrating Skyrim's 10th anniversary. So they have all kinds of information about the event they're going to have on November 4th, and giveaways and special guests for many of the actors who do the voices. So I was learning about what's going on right now with Bethesda. And Paul, my question to you is, if you are interviewing somebody to be an intern or to work with you, would it help that before the conversation, they were on the website and know a little bit about what Bethesda's doing like today, in addition to the games that they make?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's one thing, like you said, you can be a fan of the games and play the games. But if you're taking the effort and the time to check out our news, our website, maybe our Twitter feed, to see what we have going on that's hyper relevant at that moment in time, that can show that you took some initiative to learn about us, that you're actually interested. And I think the big thing there is that initiative of doing something deliberate and intentional to make sure that you're as educated and as informed as possible. That's always a good sign. That's a good characteristic in pretty much any workspace that you might go into.
I like that word you use, that deliberate and intentional, right? It's like, by actually going to the website, it shows you took time out of your day, you really wanted to learn. You weren't just doing something quickly, oh, let me just check a box. You really were trying. And that's what you want to see, that someone's actually trying to learn and show you that they care. As we get into our discussion, I want to invite all of you to our Q&A area along that bottom row in Zoom. And please start putting your own questions in the Q&A. And as you put your questions, include your name and your school, or teachers include your student's name and the school, so we can give proper credit when I ask the questions out loud. So start to put your questions for Paul in the chat. And I'll kick it off with take us through like a day, Paul. Like, what does a day look like? What are some of the meetings you're in, the conversations that you have, as you help to shape what video games ultimately look like based on consumer preference?
Yeah, so that's a good question. There's a lot of different meetings with a lot of different types of folks and a lot of different work that I'm working on. So often some of my meetings will be with the game developers themselves. And I'll come to them and I'll give them recommendations on preferences of video gamers, and say, hey, look at this competitor that we have, or this other game that did this really cool, interesting thing that people really like. We think that it might work within your game, whoever the game developer is. And we'll talk to them, and they'll respond with, well, this is what's practically feasible within our game design. This is our vision of the game. This is how that might align or not align with our vision. So there's conversations like that. Often I'm working as well with the BI team and the data science team. And they're
what does BI mean, Paul?
That's a good question. So BI stands for business intelligence. And it can mean a lot of different things at different companies. But for the most part, generally in this industry, it means the people that are looking at the data that's on the back end of the video game. So when you're clicking buttons and when you're making certain choices, we're collecting all of that data and we're analyzing it and reviewing it so that we can understand what your experience is like.
Interesting. That's very interesting. By the way, if you're putting questions in the chat, please put them in the Q&A, not the chat, because the chat moves too quickly. We cannot track it down. We have a question here from Elise Cronin, Riverbend Work Program. What are the most important soft skills needed for your job? So communicating with your team? What are some of the speaking or writing or critical thinking skills that you use during the day?
Yeah, so soft skills, it kind of runs the gamut. The first one is just being able to clearly communicate my thoughts, either spoken or written. So I do a lot of sending emails. Often nowadays, with work from home being so prevalent, I'm spending a lot of time on Slack. So being able to communicate effectively and clearly in some sort of text form where I'm texting with somebody on Slack or with another instant messaging software, being able to send emails. Some other skills that are relevant for my role in particular and for other roles is just being able to look at data and kind of tell a story or a narrative from looking at the data. And I think the hard skill there is being able to manipulate and do something interesting technically with the data, but the soft skill is then being able to convert that into a piece of information you can easily transmit to somebody else.
Nice.
So that they can understand it. And for me, what I've found has really helped me excel at work is being able to do that. Is take something complicated and narrow it down to a few words that can easily be understood by someone else.
I love that. We often talk in here that less is more, right? If you can say a lot in a small space, it's more powerful, and people can take the message and run with it. We already have like 60 some questions, so we'll get through as many as we can. We have Daniel Purdue. He says, and I don't know how deeply you know this answer, but let's try. What is the project approval pipeline? Like, what are the steps before the game really just goes out to the public? Like, what are some of the testing steps and what's the protocol there?
Yeah, so I can talk about it at a certain level. I can't give too many specifics, obviously.
Yeah.
But generally in the industry, and for us specifically, we do some form of this. There's a concepting phase where the development team will come up with an idea of what they want to make. They'll then shop that around and get feedback and input from other folks. And if people seem to think in Congress that it's a good idea, they'll start working on putting together a more full concept. And they'll start building a early alpha build of the game. They'll start actually generating models and generating gameplay mechanics and some of the features and systems that are core to the game. And then we'll test that once we get that to a point where the actual programming is testable. Alongside when all of that's being worked on, when the actual development of the programming is being done and the generation of the models and the worlds and the space, there's a whole other team of artists, there's a whole other team of designers that are creating the art of the game. They're turning the concepts of something that we might have drawn on a picture board and actually creating 3D models and 3D images to represent that within the game world. And then once we've gotten to the point where we think the game works and we think it makes sense, and that it's a fun, enjoyable experience, then we'll start refining how we want to communicate that to gamers and how we want to market it. And so that's called positioning in the marketing world. And so we'll figure out what the core aspects of the game that we think are most fun are, and what aspects about that do we think people will kind of latch onto when we market the game. And that's one of my main components in the whole process, is helping to guide the various teams once they think they have a game that they know that's going to be fun, figure out the best way to communicate what that fun is.
That's great. Thank you for taking us through that. And a couple of you have asked about the recording. Yes, we will put out a recording tomorrow morning, so you can share this with students through our YouTube channel. So just hang on for that. Interesting question here from a student in Idaho, one of Tammy Perez, one of Tammy's students. Is there a way I can work in video games without working on games that are violent? Are there games I can do? Are there things I can do that are not, we see so much in the media about games are violent and they're very physical, they're aggressive. Are there other things you can do that are not violent and still have a great career in this space?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I think the first thing you can do is make a fun game that isn't violent if you want to. You know, it comes up pretty often when I talk to the development teams in particular, that the best way to get into gaming is just go out and start making your own games. Finding resources online. I think Unity is a game development engine with a really, really good platform around it and a really good community to provide resources to learn. But in terms of nonviolence, there are companies out there that make less violent games. If you wanted to work for one of those companies, you'd obviously want to look up who those companies are, maybe find games that you see that aren't very violent, look at who makes those games and who publishes those games, and target those companies with whatever efforts you put into finding a new job. So that's what I would say. It's maybe start with the games that you know that aren't violent, and start to follow the breadcrumbs to see who works on those games and how you can get integrated into those organizations.
Thank you for that. We have a question from actually several people that are asking this, but Logan Montello, thank you. Also Teresa Schmedding, asking about when you're looking at going to college or school, beyond high school, advanced degrees, what types of degree, like majors or degrees or programs do you recommend? Do you need to go into a computer science degree? Would that be preferred if you want to work in actually creating the games? What's your take on what they should be focusing on in school?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it depends on what your interest is. Computer science is definitely helpful if you want to get into building the engines of games and building the back end of the games. There's also now a lot of schools that have actual gaming programs and game development programs that kind of teach you a little bit of everything so that you're well rounded. So if you want to go into video games, I'd look for programs or schools that have programs specific to video games. There's also a lot of art programs out there that have classes and have degrees that focus on the art within game design. So creating 3D models, creating visual worlds. So it really depends on what you're interested in. There's a lot of resources out there in a lot of different directions. For me, I didn't even study video games. I studied economics, but there's a whole world of economics, and there's a whole world of marketing and accounting. So if you wanted to work more on the business side of things, you don't necessarily have to study video games specifically, but if you study something that interests you and you align that with your interest in video games, then maybe you could contribute in a way that's not specifically making the game itself.
That's actually, I was going to segue nicely. A question from Courtney McGowan. Like, okay, we think about video game development, a large company like Bethesda, but some people are in there creating the games, and there's lots of other jobs at the company too. What are some other jobs people can do at a video game company? You started to mention like business development or administrative work. What are some other jobs and roles that you see around you at the company?
Yeah, for sure. There's pretty much everything you'd imagine at a company that is a business, right? So we have an accounting team, we have a finance team, we have marketing people, we have community engagement people who are on our social media and are on the forums with gamers. We have people that are kind of public facing where they're actually on the live streams playing our games in front of folks. So there's a whole gamut. We even have facilities teams. We have architects that are on staff because we have to build offices and we need to fill those offices with really cool, unique, interactive spaces so that we can get together and work when we get together. So there's all sorts of different things you could do. I had mentioned the business intelligence. We have an entire information technology team, so an IT team that's making sure that we're able to build the games and have the latest and greatest gaming technology to be able to test the games and play them ourselves, so to speak.
Okay, thank you for that. We have a question from Matthew Brown. Is it too early to start looking for software development internships in high school? Or could I be doing that? And if it is the right time, how can I prepare myself to be an intern while in high school?
Yeah, I would say it's never too early. If you know that you're interested in something and you know you want to pursue it or at least explore it as a career, I don't think it's ever too early. The best first step I would say for any of this, if you don't have an immediate opportunity in front of you, is to just start toying around and tooling around and see what you can make on your own. A lot of the work that we do is a lot of self-starter problem solving. And so all throughout our organization, from the game development teams all the way through to the marketing teams, everyone has to be a problem solver. And so if you can practice your problem solving skills and you can say, hey, I'd love to make a game so that I can start to learn the process and start to see what that's like, so that I can then, when I go for an interview for an internship, I can say, hey, look at this cool thing that I made, and this is what I did to make it. That's going to put you one step ahead of somebody who just signs up for it because they're interested in video games. So even if you're not extremely successful, and I'm sure you will be, if even having that experience of trying and kind of fumbling through some of the difficult things when you're learning how to build something, maybe follow a YouTube video and download Unity, and try it for free, that would put you way far ahead of other people who just say, I'm interested in video games, I want to get a job.
That's great. And that again flows into this next question. It's from Mason Robeson Early College. Thank you, Mason, for your question. And this came up in our last discussion about this too. If you want to learn about the industry, you want to kind of get a feel for it. I remember when we talked to your colleague last time too, he said, just start tinkering around, right? Just start messing around, making games, making mistakes, breaking stuff and fixing it again. Is that still the advice you would say to students who are interested in the field? Is just get some experience, start to play around?
Yeah, I think that's spot on. That's really the best way to learn anything is to kind of teach yourself, so to speak. And there's a lot of resources out there. So if you hop on YouTube and just start searching for a how-to beginner video game, just phrases like that, and download something that's like Unity or one of those other game development engines, and just start playing around. If you have an idea, see if you can make it happen. If you don't have an idea, maybe ask some friends what they think would be cool. I was making video game maps in high school myself for Counter-Strike, if anybody plays Counter-Strike. And it was really a fun activity for creative flow, to be honest. I don't make video game maps nowadays, but it was just a lot of fun to say, hey, I'd love to build this world in a game. And I'd go and use the map making tool and make the world and invite my friends to play it. And that was always a fun experience, even though it didn't necessarily directly lead to my career.
Yeah, but it was clearly even back in school, you were interested in it, and then you naturally found your way into it. And I want to add on to that a question from Terry Ertman. Thank you, Terry, asking about middle schoolers. Can middle schoolers also gain experience, sitting at home looking at YouTube videos or playing around? It doesn't have to be something that you wait until high school or college. You could start, experimenting, getting better even in middle school, right?
Yeah, I think, if you're not comfortable learning how to program something, there's actually some really cool games out there. And I'm sure most of you know about Minecraft and about Roblox. And both Minecraft and Roblox are great because they offer a platform where you can go in and you can create games and you can kind of tinker and learn the thought process of how a game could work without having to understand all of these really, really potentially complicated video game languages. So just taking some time, poking on Roblox in Minecraft and looking at what other people have created and trying to understand how they created those things, that can really help you start to learn the thought process that goes into creating an interactive experience that essentially is a video game.
This is an interesting question. It's really kind of a in the weeds like video game question from Kenneth Banks. How do you create a healthy balance between getting players hooked on your games while still adding quality features? A lot of games end up reusing old content or creating low effort content that forces you to continue playing the game that's not enjoyable. You know what he is getting at with that?
Yeah, I mean, that's actually a pretty complicated question. That's a fantastic question. That he has a future in the business side of things if you really want to. So to be honest, there's certain things where people are playing games and they kind of get trained or conditioned to expect certain things or to learn certain things within a game. So when you create a new game or a new experience, sometimes you want to carry over some of those consistent things that people have been trained in other games or conditioned in other games to expect or know, so that when you introduce them to like one or two new things, they don't get overwhelmed with all of the newness. So you kind of find stuff that works and then you build off of it so that you can make sure that people can fully enjoy the experience instead of having a million new things thrown at them and have it be overwhelming. And then I'd say it sounded like he was talking about some of the grind that's put into games. So there are some games that are pretty grindy, and there's a lot of people that like the grind and like.
What does that mean? The grind. What does that mean?
The grind. So the grind is, say you have an achievement and it's go and do this thing 50 times, and the thing is kind of a monotonous, repeated task where you just have to do something simple that might not be very exciting, but you have to do it a lot to hit some sort of achievement or goal or threshold. That's what the grind would be, and some games put that in because some people like that. It's an escapism, and it's an achievement for some people that they like to work towards, and it allows people in general to explore different aspects of the game and try and figure out within the game how to best accomplish whatever that achievement is.
Okay, thank you. I thought it's definitely inside the game type question, but I thought I could throw it at you.
Yeah.
And you've touched on it a little bit, but this question from Drew Skinner, Kellum High School, which I believe is in Virginia Beach, where we are. So thank you to Drew and the ATC in Virginia Beach. How would someone get their foot in the door of game designing? Like, okay, you've been tinkering around in your house, you're messing around, but like, how do you get yourself in front of somebody to be considered? Is it just applying like everybody else? Are there communities you can become part of where you get to know people in the space? Like, what's the way in?
Yeah, so I can't speak to any communities that I know of that would be super helpful from the start. I'd say the first thing would be to start looking for internships, and I'm sure you're going to do that. And the other early entry that a lot of people I've seen take is working in a QA team, so quality assurance. If you're near a school, or if you're near a game company, or if you're near a studio of some sort that has a quality assurance team, you can sometimes get a job there and start to learn how a game is made and the types of questions that are asked in game development without having to have a lot of experience yourself. And so that's one way that you can get in. But I would say that the best way is create a small portfolio of some sort. Start working on the games like we've talked about, so that when you do apply, you have something that sets you apart.
Awesome. Thank you for that. We've 126 questions. So I've been scrolling through, just looking at ones that I think will hit on different angles here. Jessica Pike says, do you need a college degree to work in this industry? Is that essential or not?
I would say no, not if you can prove yourself. I think there's a lot of industries that you can work in without a college degree. If you can show that you can do something useful and productive and effective, that doesn't mean you should skip college necessarily, assuming that you'll get the job. But there's plenty of people that work in the industry that didn't necessarily go to college, or didn't go to college for anything that has to do with what they're doing. I would say if you start tinkering with things and you're able to put together something that you think is great and that you feel proud of sharing with folks, and you put that in front of people before you go to college and you get good feedback, and it leads into a potential offer or potential job, if that's what you want and that works for you, that's great. But I think it is, in the other end of things, it is getting increasingly difficult in being able to show that you went to college and that you went through the meat grinder of what college could be, and dealt with all of the challenges that college throws at you. Then that can set you apart from folks, because college is there's a lot of new challenges that get presented to people when they enter college that they didn't necessarily get presented before college.
Yeah, I think that's true. There's a growth development by going through a college experience. It's not essential, but it is just what happens when you go through that. We've had several people ask this question, and I believe there is, this came up on our last session with you, a way to test games. Isn't there an opportunity for people to request to be testers through the site to just as a way to kind of get involved and help you?
Yeah, so we actually, on our website, if you go to Bethesda.net and you scroll to the bottom, there should be a little thing that says playtest in the footer, and you can sign up to playtest with us. One thing I will say is we generally don't have playtests for anyone that's under 18, just because of certain laws dealing with minors, and a lot of our games are for mature audiences. So it's difficult for us to include anyone who's under 18 in our playtests. But if you go to other publishers and other video game companies' websites, you can sign up for their playtests by basically doing the same thing. Maybe go search Electronic Arts playtest or Xbox playtest. And a lot of these companies will have some place where you can sign up to be in their testing group. Xbox has something called the Xbox Insiders, it's a pretty big, sophisticated program where if you have an Xbox account, you can sign up to be in it. And they will send you invites to play early betas and whatnot of games that they have coming out.
Awesome. Logan says, I tested Infinite and it was awesome.
Nice. That's great.
So what we're going to take just a quick sort of pause in the conversation, and I'm going to do a screen share, something that we always do at the end of towards the end of our conversation, because we will end at 2:15 Eastern time. As promised, is I want to share a screen with you, and we're going to talk about a communication skill lesson together, a really quick one. and you'll notice a text message on the screen. And what do you notice about that text message? Let me actually promote my chat again. Okay. The text message from the employer is all lowercase, right? Lowercase everything, abbreviations, right? And so what we want to focus on here is when we're in a text conversation or an email conversation, what should our behavior look like? How should we write messages to people? Even if the employer is using abbreviations and texting language, what should we do in our response? So what I want you to show me in the chat, and the teachers, you can type for the student or they can sit there and do it, but I want to see the student practice this. How would you respond to this text message with proper grammar and capitalization? Can you show me what, if they said, are you still available to make the job interview on Tuesday at 11? How would you respond with proper grammar? Please show us in the chat. Let's do a quick writing lesson together. That's a real world situation. Thank you, Duke. Great. I'm seeing some good stuff. Yes, I'll be there with a period. No, you have horrible grammar. Why would I come? I don't know if you want to write that, but you can think it in your head, perhaps. A lot of good stuff here. And we're seeing a capital letter to start the sentence, a period at the end of the sentence. You know, teachers, are you seeing too much lowercase everything, no punctuation, run-on sentences? Any hands up for that? We have to work on these skills, because even in a job where maybe you're talking to people who are young and they, you know, you think that they don't care about these things. When you're working for a professional environment, I'll throw it back to Paul, you know, you're working for a large company, right? You have a lot of investors, you have a lot of pressures, you have to maintain a certain level of professionalism all the time. So for you, even just yourself, if you're communicating with your team and it's all run-on sentences, no punctuation, one giant paragraph, no spaces, is that going to help you to communicate with your team if you're writing that way to people?
No, I think there's a time and place for everything, right? And one thing that I really did like that some of your some of the people were sending is they were reiterating the date and time.
Yes.
Which when you're confirming a date and time with somebody, reiterating the exact date and time that they proposed, for me is always a great thing to say, hey, this information was properly conveyed.
Yes.
So that's something that's awesome. But yeah, I think it would run on sentences and texting is good if you're just trying to have a stream of thought with people. But a lot of times, if you're trying to present something that you want to make sure the other person understands the first time they read it, that using proper grammar, using proper punctuation will ensure that they will read it, they'll understand it, and they won't have to then ask follow-up questions. It limits the potential for confusion or misunderstanding. So when you're trying to convey something that you want to make sure they understand on the first communication, that type of stuff becomes really important.
And yes, thank you for that. And it's also when you're applying for a job, right? I mean, you don't know the communication behavior of the team yet. And you can't make assumptions that they want it a certain way. When you're trying to win their respect, when they don't know you yet, you have to keep it up here as much as possible, because you don't know how things go. And you don't want to take those types of chances and they write you off because they didn't like how you're communicating with them. So even something as little as confirming an appointment in a text message could be the difference between the job or going to somebody else. And that's what I'm stressing, is that these little moments have a lot of importance for us, and we have to take every little word and sentence seriously when we're up. You know, you're trying to get a job at Bethesda, you think you're the only one applying there. Everybody in the world wants to work for a company like that if you're interested in video games. So you have to bring your A game all the time. I have a interesting, we'll kind of wrap up on this question because I wanted to ask before we pause. What happens when a video game launches and it doesn't do all that great? It doesn't sell well, it didn't land with the audience. Like, how do you sort of pull it back and figure out how to come back at it? Do you retool it? Do you drop it? How does that go?
Yeah, that's kind of a loaded question, but a lot of times we try and understand it. We try and understand what we might have done differently if we could start over. We try and understand why it didn't succeed, why maybe people weren't as happy with it for one reason or another. Is it because we didn't market it properly? Is it because the game wasn't as good as we would have hoped it to be? There's a lot of ways to answer that question. But it's a case by case answer, to be honest, right? Sometimes you look at it and you say, hey, this game probably shouldn't have really been something we worked on. Maybe we'll reassess and put our resources towards other things. And other times you put a game out there and you say, hey, this really is awesome. This really could be great. We just need to make sure that we polish it up in certain ways. And then people will love it and want to play it, into the future.
There's some discussion in the chat about Fallout 76. Some people think it was great and some people don't. So I don't know.
I mean, I love the game. I love Fallout 76.
Okay, as we start to wrap up, I want, for those teachers who joined us a little bit late, I want to mention what we said at the start. We put together an email etiquette Google Drive of free resources for professional email addresses, not sending emails like text, subject lines, addressing people, signature lines, all these little lessons to bring into your classroom and your program. So I'd love to pass that along. Many of you have already requested it. Also, an online presentation checklist with some quick techniques on how to do effective virtual presentations. If you would like these 2 resources for free, please go to the chat. I'll mention it one last time. Put your email address and the word interested. And if you missed it, we'll pass it along. What we like to do, if you're new to the Rubin community, some of you have been to many of our sessions, some of you are brand new, we will put a 5-minute invite on your calendar in the next couple of days to learn about your program, help you to bring these resources into your classes and say hello in an actual conversation, because it's very hard to do with a room of this size. So please put your interested in your email address and we'll get that to you if you'd like. This is for the teachers, okay, not students. It'll get down to you through your teacher. All right, a couple last things to mention. As I said before, we have another session, another virtual internship in 2 weeks. We're covering the world of being a veterinarian on November 16th with a vet here in Virginia, Dr. Allison Yari. So she'll be talking to us about the work she does. And also, if you are watching on a recording, you can also have our resources. Just email us to support@rubineducation.com with Rubin email worksheets, and we'll get it to you that way. And finally, everyone who was with us today, will send you a certificate for being here. It'll come to you on Thursday, and we will also send out the recording of today's session on Thursday. So look out for both of those things in your email. I will come back out of here and we'll wrap up with Paul. Paul, any final thoughts? We have a lot of students here, elementary, middle, high school, college. They're all just looking up saying, I would love to work in this space. Any final thoughts, any final advice you could give them?
Yeah, I mean, I think we kind of hit on it, but just start making things, just start playing around, start experimenting. If you know you want to do something as a career, start trying to teach yourself how to do what you think you need to learn to do it. And you'll start meeting people when you ask questions in forums and in communities, and you'll start to learn, maybe it's not for you, maybe it is for you. You'll start to expose yourself to new challenges. So that would be my main advice is start to try and teach yourself and start to try and learn on your own, so that when you get the opportunity to talk to somebody who is a little bit more knowledgeable, you know the questions to ask to expand your knowledge and to expand what you have in your tool set, and you'll impress them because you'll have already thought through certain questions. So that would be my main advice is
That's great.
Start to try teaching yourself as much as you can as early as possible.
I like that, knowing the questions to ask, right? Like you're already in the work, you're playing around and you have questions that are more advanced than just like, well, how do you do this? Or, how did you get started? It's more like process questions, technical questions. And I think a developer would love to get into that with a young person, really start talking shop, as they say, because the student's already immersed in it. So that's a great answer, a great way to wrap up. Again, thank you to everyone who was here. I want to thank all the teachers and students for submitting questions. We had 140 questions. I probably got to 10 or 12 of them. It's just too many, and they're all really good. And I appreciate your participation. Teachers, thank you for bringing your students and joining us in your classrooms. I hope you'll come back in 2 weeks for the veterinarian session, and we'll learn all about that occupation. Thank you to Paul. Thank you to Ms. Amber Caldwell for her help. Can we have some Zoom hands up as a show of virtual applause for Mr. Silverman and all the knowledge he shared with us today? Because he's in the middle of his work days. He's a busy man and he dropped out of his day to help us. And we appreciate that. We have 80, 90 hands up. So there you go.
It was a
Imagine what
pleasure.
it sounds
Thanks
like.
for having
Imagine
me.
what it sounds like. Thanks everybody again. We'll see you in a couple weeks and have a great rest of your week.